Welcome to my channel, Rise Up with Steve. Please hit like, subscribe, and don't forget to share with your friends. When you stop talking to a man, something powerful happens, and most women don't even realize it. See, men are wired differently. A man doesn't always react when you're talking, explaining, arguing, or even crying. He hears the words, but he doesn't feel the loss yet. But silence hits a man in a place words never can. When you stop talking to him, the first thing he'll do is feel the shift. He won't say it out loud, but he'll notice the peace is different. The phone doesn't buzz the same. The day doesn't feel complete. That's when confusion sets in. He starts asking himself, why isn't she calling? Why isn't she explaining? Why isn't she chasing me like before? And that's when the power balance changes. A man starts to value what he almost lost, not what he always had access to. When you were always available, always explaining yourself, always forgiving too fast, he didn't have to work for your presence. But when you stop talking, you stop feeding his ego. Now his mind has space, and trust me, a man's mind is dangerous when it's left alone. He starts replaying moments. He remembers your laugh, your support, the way you believed in him when nobody else did. When you stop talking to a man, the first thing that happens is almost invisible, yet incredibly powerful. Men are not wired to process emotions the same way women do. They often think they are fine with everything being the same, with a constant presence and constant attention. But when that flow of words, messages, and attention suddenly stops, something inside him shifts. He begins to notice the absence, even if he doesn't admit it to anyone, even to himself. That's the point. He finally feels the loss. He finally feels what it's like to be without the person he might have taken for granted. You see, men often don't realize what they have until it's not there anymore. He may not have shown appreciation when you were always talking, always explaining, always available. But the moment you stop, he starts to understand the true weight of your presence. It's like the quiet that follows a storm. Suddenly he sees what was always there but never truly noticed. At first, he might try to rationalize it. He may think you are busy, or maybe you are just tired. But deep down, he knows something is different. That phone call he expected never comes. The messages he assumed would always appear simply don't. The text that once made him smile now remains silent, and that silence echoes louder than words ever could. It's in that silence that he begins to confront feelings he avoided before. Confusion creeps in because for the first time, he cannot control the narrative. You are no longer explaining yourself, defending yourself, or chasing his approval. That's when the reality hits him. Your presence is not unlimited. Your attention is not automatic, and your affection is not guaranteed. He begins to notice little things. The empty space on the couch where you would sit, the quiet that replaced your laughter. The moments he used to share with you suddenly feel incomplete without your voice. These are not things he might openly talk about, because pride often keeps men from expressing vulnerability. But internally, he's asking questions he may not be ready to answer. Why isn't she here? Why isn't she talking to me? What did I do wrong? Or perhaps even more frightening to him, what if I didn't do anything at all and she just realized I wasn't worth her time? That thought alone can be devastating because it forces him to recognize the value he failed to see while you were constantly available. Men might resist acknowledging this for a while, but the feeling grows stronger with each passing day of silence. As he starts to reflect, he may replay memories in his mind, the moments you laughed together, the conversations you shared, the support you offered when nobody else did. Suddenly, the little things he overlooked begin to feel monumental. The sound of your voice, which once felt ordinary, becomes something he craves. The thoughtful gestures, the words of encouragement, the way you made him feel understood, all those things come rushing back in a way that no argument, no reasoning, and no chasing could ever have delivered. Silence creates a mirror. It shows him what he missed, what he took for granted, and what might now be slipping away forever. And it's in this moment when you stop talking that he experiences a form of clarity he might never reach otherwise. He finally feels the loss, and with that feeling comes a new perspective. Suddenly, your value is undeniable. Suddenly, the reality of potentially losing you begins to shape his thoughts and his actions. He starts to understand that your absence is not empty space. It is a space that cannot easily be replaced. The silence speaks louder than any words ever could. And it's in that silence that he begins to recognize the truth. He cannot afford to take you for granted anymore. When you stop talking to a man, something magical happens, something that no argument, no fight, and no lecture could ever achieve. You see, men process things differently. When you argue, when you yell, when you try to explain every little feeling, most men hear the words, but they don't always feel the impact. Words can bounce off a man's mind if he's not ready to internalize them. But silence is a different kind of language. It's the language of reflection, of absence, of presence turned invisible. It's when you stop speaking, stop texting, stop chasing, that he begins to think deeply more than he ever did while you were constantly talking. He finally has space in his mind to process his own behavior, to face the truth he may have ignored, and to feel the weight of what he could lose. When you argue, a man often becomes defensive. He focuses on winning rather than understanding. He focuses on being right rather than realizing the value of your words. He may nod, smile, or promise change in the heat of the moment, but deep down, his mind is busy protecting his ego. Arguments create noise, and noise can mask reflection. But silence forces him to step out of that noise. It gives him room to breathe, to think, and to realize that something important has shifted. He notices that your words are gone, your reactions are gone, and the tension he might have ignored before has now been replaced by absence. He starts asking questions he may never have asked during a fight. Why is she quiet? Why isn't she explaining herself? Why am I not in her thoughts the way I thought I was? And those questions lead to reflection, and reflection leads to understanding. Reflection is a powerful thing for a man because it's rare. Men are often action-oriented. They fix problems with deeds, not emotions. But when the action they relied on the constant talking, the constant explaining, the constant chasing is no longer there. He has nothing to do but think. And thinking can be more powerful than any shouting match. He begins replaying moments in his mind, seeing things he ignored when you were speaking. He remembers your patience, your kindness, your loyalty, and the ways you went out of your way to make him feel valued. All the little things he overlooked suddenly take on huge significance. He realizes that while he was busy living in the moment, you were building memories, building a connection, building a foundation, and now he faces the reality that the foundation might no longer be available to him if he doesn't act. The quiet gives him a mirror. It shows him his mistakes without you having to point them out. It highlights what he took for granted without any confrontation. He starts to notice patterns, how often he ignored your needs, how he assumed your forgiveness, how he expected your presence without giving his own. Reflection is uncomfortable for him at first, because pride makes it so, but it's necessary. It's in the silence that he begins to see himself through your absence. He begins to connect the dots between his actions or inactions and the space that now exists between you. The more he thinks, the more he realizes what he might be losing, and that realization can be much more powerful than 1,000 arguments. Eventually, the reflection forces him to consider change. It pushes him to acknowledge the parts of himself he's been blind to. It allows him to feel emotions he may have buried under distractions, pride, or ego. When you stop talking, the silence becomes a teacher. It forces him to evaluate the relationship, evaluate his behavior, and evaluate the value of what he could lose. Arguments can provoke anger, frustration, and resistance. But silence provokes introspection, and introspection can lead to growth, understanding, and action. And that is why silence is so much more effective than words when it comes to truly making a man reflect on what matters. When you stop talking to a man, something happens that words alone could never create. He begins to miss more than just your conversation. He starts to miss your presence, your energy, the way you make the room feel alive. Men often think they are missing the words, the explanations, the arguments, or even the complaints. But the truth is, what they miss most is the person behind the words. When you're always there, always available, always responding, it becomes easy for him to take your presence for granted. He forgets that you are not just someone who speaks or listens, you are a force. A presence that shapes his world in ways he never fully appreciated. The moment you step back, even silently, he feels that emptiness, that quiet space where you used to be begins to scream louder than any conversation ever could. At first, he may try to ignore it. He may think that he's okay without you, that life goes on as normal, but life doesn't feel normal. When he reaches for his phone, there's no ping, no message, no notification from you. He looks around, and the little spaces that you used to fill the chair you always sat in, the laughter that used to echo, the calm you brought to stressful moments suddenly feel hollow. He doesn't just miss the sound of your voice. He misses the effect of your presence on his day, on his mood, and on his life. That absence makes him reflect, but in a different way than words ever could. He starts to crave the energy that you brought, the warmth, the way everything felt more complete with you around. It's fascinating because men often confuse your presence with a convenience. They assume it's always there, and they rarely stop to consider what life would feel like without it. But when you step back, when you stop talking, he experiences that absence firsthand. Suddenly, he begins to notice the small things, the way you laughed at his jokes, even the ones that weren't funny. He remembers the way you supported him when nobody else did, how you encouraged him to keep going, how you celebrated the little wins that he thought were too small to matter. These aren't words. They are your essence, your being, the energy that fills the spaces around him. That's what he misses most. And it's far more impactful than anything you could have told him in a conversation. Missing your presence also forces him to examine what he contributed or failed to contribute to your connection. He realizes that while you were there, present and alive in the relationship, he may have been distracted, careless, or unappreciative. Now, with you quiet, he's forced to confront the reality of what he's taken for granted. The laughter, the shared moments, the comfort of knowing you were there. These were not things he ever truly acknowledged until they were absent. And absence, as they say, reveals what presence concealed. He begins to see the relationship, not in words, not in explanations, but in feelings, the quiet but undeniable pull of what he has lost by allowing you to step back. And slowly, as the days go by, that missing grows. He begins to replay moments in his mind. The times he felt your energy, your warmth, your reassurance. He starts to crave the calmness your presence brought, the way your laughter lit up even the dullest days. The realization dawns on him that it's not just your words he valued. It's the way you made him feel alive, whole, and understood. That presence is irreplaceable. And when he starts to feel that void, he begins to understand your true worth. Words could have tried to convey it, but nothing teaches a man like the quiet absence of your presence. When you stop talking to a man, the silence doesn't just create reflection, it creates a test. Men are wired to respond to absence in ways words can't force. If he truly cares, if his heart is invested, that silence will push him to take action. And when I say action, I'm not talking about empty words or fake promises. I mean real effort. Real steps, real changes. A man who cares will not sit idly by while the one he values walks away, even slightly. He will start to notice the gaps, the quiet, the absence, and that realization becomes a catalyst. It forces him to move, to do what he may have avoided, to show that his feelings are real, that his love is not just a concept, but a commitment. At first, he might struggle to figure out what to do. Silence is unfamiliar to many men because they are used to immediate reactions, instant communication, and the constant reassurance that presence provides. But now, the silence hits like a wall. He can't charm, argue, or talk his way out of it. He has to confront the reality that action, not words, is required. He begins to evaluate himself. What did he do wrong? What did he neglect? What was he taking for granted? If he cares, this reflection translates into movement. He may call, text, or show up in ways that matter, not in ways that are convenient. The silence has created a space where excuses no longer work. If he wants you, he has to prove it. You see, action is the truest measure of care. Words can be empty, apologies can be hollow, promises can be fleeting, but effort cannot lie. When a man is moved to act because of your silence, it reveals the depth of his feelings. He will reach out in ways that are meaningful. He may plan a gesture, try to reconnect, or simply show up consistently where before he may have taken for granted your presence. That's the power of silence. It turns reflection into movement. It transforms longing into effort. It forces him to step outside of complacency and meet the reality of your worth with action. Because in the quiet, the truth becomes undeniable. If he hesitates, if he delays, it becomes clear where he stands. Men who care don't wait forever. They recognize opportunity, they recognize value, and they understand the cost of inaction. But men who don't care or who are not willing to meet you halfway will let silence pass them by. They will continue life as normal, assuming that the quiet will eventually return to the old pattern without them having to change. That's the distinction. Silence separates the ones who are truly invested from the ones who are merely present. It gives you clarity by forcing him to respond if his heart is genuine. It's important to understand that the action doesn't always come immediately. Some men need time to process, to recognize, to feel the weight of your absence, but if he cares, that action will eventually arrive. It might be a heartfelt apology, a gesture to show he's listening, a willingness to compromise, or a consistent effort to rebuild what he almost lost. And when that action comes, it is far more valuable than anything he could have said while you were talking. Silence has a way of demanding authenticity. It strips away the noise, the excuses, and the superficiality. It leaves only the truth, his feelings, and his willingness to act. And when he does act, it confirms everything. It confirms that your silence mattered, that your presence is irreplaceable, and that he values you enough to step up. That's the power of stopping communication, not to punish, not to manipulate, but to reveal the truth through the actions that follow. Because action speaks louder than words ever could. When you stop talking to a man and he doesn't respond, the silence does more than just create emptiness, it reveals the truth. Men may talk a lot, they may promise a lot, they may act like they care, but silence strips everything down to reality. If he doesn't reach out, if he doesn't make an effort, then that silence becomes a mirror reflecting his true intentions. It shows you exactly where he stands without the need for arguments, accusations, or endless explanations. Silence has a way of cutting through the noise, cutting through the ego, and laying bare the reality of a person's priorities. At first, you might feel anxious, wondering if something is wrong or if he's upset. But as the days pass and he still doesn't reach out, the truth becomes unavoidable. Men who care will act. They will push past pride, discomfort, or confusion to show their commitment. But men who are indifferent, men who were never serious, or men who only value convenience will let the silence remain unbroken. The absence of action speaks louder than any words he might have said in the past. Silence forces a man to show who he really is. Because without the constant talking and reassurance, there is nothing left to hide behind. This is where clarity comes in. You don't need to question yourself, overthink his motives, or make excuses for his behavior. Silence has done the work for you. It has exposed what he was willing or unwilling to do when challenged by your absence. If he doesn't respond, it shows that his interest was superficial, his care was shallow, and his intentions were not aligned with yours. The man who truly values you will not let silence stand for long. The one who doesn't will make it obvious without even realizing it. This is a powerful lesson because it allows you to stop guessing and start seeing reality for what it is. It's important to understand that this revelation through silence is not punishment. You are not withholding your words to manipulate or play games. You are giving yourself the gift of truth. You are creating a space where his actions or lack thereof speak volumes. When he doesn't respond, you learn who he is without the distractions of conversation, emotion, or debate. You see him as he truly is, and that clarity is invaluable. It prevents you from investing further in someone who isn't fully invested in you. Silence acts as a natural filter, separating those who are genuine from those who are not. Men often rely on presence to hide weaknesses, to cover up indifference, or to mask a lack of effort. They depend on the fact that constant availability will make you forgive, accommodate, and continue to give without reciprocation. But when the words stop, when the attention stops, when the effort stops, there is nowhere left for him to hide. If he doesn't step up, the silence exposes everything. The lack of priority, the absence of initiative, and the truth about what he really values. This is not about shaming it. It's about revealing the reality so that you can make decisions with clarity and confidence. Silence also teaches patience and self-respect. It reminds you that your presence is not a given and that the value you bring should not be ignored. If he doesn't respond, you see it clearly, and you are free to redirect your energy toward people who truly deserve it. It allows you to protect your heart and to stop wasting time on someone who isn't willing to show up. The quiet is not empty, it's enlightening. It exposes intentions that words alone could never fully reveal. And it gives you the insight you need to move forward with certainty and dignity. When you start talking to a man, you're not just creating space for him to think or reflect, you're reclaiming your own power. Silence is a weapon, but not in the way most people think. It's not about punishment, manipulation, or games. It's about self-respect, dignity, and understanding that your time, attention, and energy are not things to be taken for granted. When you continuously give your presence, your words, and your patience to someone who doesn't value it, you hand over control. You let their actions or lack of action dictate your peace, your happiness, and even your self-worth. But the moment you stop talking, the balance shifts. You stop validating behavior that doesn't honor you. You stop feeding an ego that thrives on your availability. And in that silence, you regain the power that belongs to you. Self-respect isn't something that can be begged for, explained, or negotiated through endless talking. It's something that is shown through action, through boundaries, and through the decisions you make when faced with disregard. By stepping back and being silent, you are drawing a line. You are saying that your presence has value, that your emotions matter, and that your attention is not a commodity to be freely used without consideration. A man who respects you will recognize that line and step up. A man who doesn't will reveal himself through inaction. Either way, the silence is a reflection of your power because you are no longer surrendering it to someone else. This shift in power is subtle at first, but it grows stronger with every day of quiet. You begin to feel the freedom of not constantly explaining yourself, not chasing approval, and not trying to validate his feelings at the cost of your own. Your energy, once consumed by his attention, now belongs entirely to you. You become attuned to your own needs, your own priorities, and your own worth. This is the real reason silence is so effective. It forces the other person to confront what they might lose, while simultaneously reminding you of what you already have in yourself. Your self-respect becomes the anchor in a sea of uncertainty, constant, that no one can take from you unless you allow it. Men are often more sensitive to absence than presence. When you stop talking, it not only tests him, but also strengthens you. You stop reacting to every mood, every call, and every message. You stop allowing someone else's actions to dictate your emotional state. And in that process, your confidence grows. You realize that you do not need validation to feel worthy. And you understand that being available at all times is not a requirement for love or respect. Your silence is the loudest statement of self-worth you can make. It communicates that you value yourself enough to wait for the effort you deserve and not settle for less. This regained power transforms the dynamic completely. Instead of being emotionally drained, constantly explaining or negotiating love, you are now in a position of clarity and authority. You are no longer desperate for acknowledgement or approval. You are not trying to fix someone else's behavior or feelings. You are letting your presence, or the lack thereof, speak for itself. A man who truly values you will respond with effort, respect, and care. A man who doesn't will show you his true colors. Either way, you are in control because you have prioritized yourself. In the end, silence is not a void, it is empowerment. It is a way to protect your heart while testing intentions. It is a way to reclaim your dignity and remind both yourself and him that your energy is precious. By choosing not to engage, you are showing that your self-respect comes first. that your time is valuable and that love cannot be one-sided. You are shifting the power back to where it belongs to you. And that is a lesson that no words, arguments, or debates could ever teach as effectively as silence does.